Professor Golan, members of the podium, dear participants from abroad in Israel, in the next few minutes, 10 minutes at the most, I would like to tell you about a local Israeli experience dealing with one of the important issues on your agenda, namely technology transfer. Now, I want to talk about science-based industry rather than high-tech because, at least in Israel, one of the main driving forces behind the success of the Israeli industry was information and communication technology. But the typical case there is that it's enough sometimes to have one guy in a university or a college with a bright idea and with enough initiative to establish contact with the industry to start a new startup. And the investments are not terribly high. But when it comes to science-based industry, it's a different story altogether. And the infrastructure for both the universities and the industry are extremely expensive. And the question is, what do you do and how you proceed, especially when resources are scarce? And I must say that despite of the success of Israel, the Israeli industry, in the R&D industry, as you know, by all standards, the investment of the Israeli government in infrastructure is extremely low as compared to the EU, for example. So what do you do? Well, taking the Israeli way, you have to improvise. And the point is the following. First of all, if we'll take the individual researcher in a college or university, even if you get a grant, even a huge grant, it is never going to cover a big investment in infrastructure, which amounts sometimes to tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. The same thing applies to the industry. I mean, no new startup or even a well-established industry is always able to spend so much money on such infrastructure. So what do you do? Well, the government must intervene, of course, but there are different agencies which deal with different things. There's the University Planning and Grants Committee, which takes care of the universities, the chief scientist, the Ministry of Science, and so forth, Ministry of Defense. But when it comes to a big investment in infrastructure, the traditional answer or the traditional approach is that it's either too big for one agency to take care of, or, and this is typical, perhaps not only to Israel, the usual answer is, why should I do it? Let the other agency worry about that. So the third approach that never works is to approach the government for more money. So you must find a way to utilize existing budget of the different agencies and somehow put it up together, bottom up. So the idea, which was initiated by the Israeli Academy of Science, was to establish an informal forum where all those agencies are presented, and if they identify a project which is of interest to all of them, an infrastructure project, then they pool their existing resources rather than to ask for more money. And here you go. So this is the general idea. And I want to tell you about this experience. It has been going for 14 years now. And the modus operandi of Telem, Telem stands in Hebrew for National Infrastructures for R&D. The general rules are the following. If a project is approved, then it is always financed by the joint pooling of resources of the participating members, at least two, plus an automatic additional support by the treasury. Because as you know, all treasuries in every country are in love with the term pooling of resources, because this means that they don't have to give more money, but they do. I mean, they like the idea, they join in, and they automatically pay 15% of every project once approved. Now, a project must include universities, research institutes, and some industry. Now, once a proposal is brought before Telem, then a member cannot propose it without a primary obligation, conditional obligation, that if the project will be approved after being investigated and by a professional committee, then he's committed to participate. So this is a filter. The disadvantage is that if two or more agencies do agree on a project, that means that perhaps this project is overdue and it should have been started 10 years earlier, but at least, I mean, once agreed, they can push the project forward. Once a project is adopted, we set up a steering committee which consists of the major participants within Telem of two or more agencies, it depends on the case, and they are supposed to manage the project. I must stress the fact that Telem itself has no permanent staff, because the management is done, the administration is done by one of these agencies, which is appointed to push the project forward. And once this steering committee is appointed and a chairman and one major agency is taking care of that administratively, then all the money, all the budgets of the different agencies is funneled to this agency. Another important point is that every project of Telem is usually limited to 5 years only. Now, why is that? Because, in a sense, Telem, the forum is a startup, if you wish. If the idea is good, then after 5 years, resources should be found because it will be well justified, it will clear that it's working, and then there's no more convincing of the different agencies that it's important. So the money will come. The money comes from then, judging by examples, the money then comes from the government, from the universities, and from the industry. I want to stress the fact that not every project is approved. And I think that it seems to me that not approving a project is sometimes, after being checked, thoroughly checked, is as important sometimes as approving one. Because that means that the government is not going to waste good money on a bad idea. So the process of establishing technical committees, which are, by the way, usually chaired by somebody from the industry, is an important element of Telem. Now, we also look for an association, possible association with the European Union, or organization within the European Union. As a matter of fact, I mean, as an example, the first Telem project, and this is how it was all started, was based on the following. There was a proposal to establish a synchrotron in Israel. I won't tell you where. It's a very expensive ordeal, about $200 million, and you have to renew it every 5 years. It was because of Telem's decision that this was replaced by a decision not to establish a synchrotron in Israel, but rather to join forces with the ESRF in Grenoble. And we are members there. And it's not only that it's much cheaper, but as you know, and I've heard Professor Golan talk about that earlier, it's very important for the participant to fight over their slot, because this keeps them on their toes, and only the better ones get a time slot on the machine. And it's very important. And I must say that we get more than the percentage which is actually which we are participating in, because many of the proposals are good. So it doesn't mean that you get exactly the number of time slots which is proportional to your financial participation. So this is just one example. So this is a combination of an example where not to do something was combined with another decision to make it to do it elsewhere. Now let me end by simply listing down the project so far, or most of them. The first project was the participation in the ESRF, as I said. The second one had to do with Internet 2, which was at that time a big deal, broadband system that should serve the industry and the universities. Now you get it for almost free, of course. Nanotechnology. This was the most impressive and biggest project until now. It amounted to $231 million. Not all of the money came from the government. It came from the government via Telem, the universities, and donations. In other projects, we also use such a triangular model where the third party is sometimes the industry itself. Now, strangely enough, maybe not that strange because it happens everywhere, we slowly find ourselves dealing with more and more bio stuff. And the examples are stem cells R&D and centers, and the biotechnology centers, National Tissue Bank, and another small thing which is useful, I hope, because it's connected with cloud computing indirectly, is grid computation. And in the pipe are now two big projects. One has to do with photonics, and the other one has to do with brain research. It wasn't decided as yet how to proceed on this project. Conclusions. Well, Telem, I think, it's my personal idea, should stay informal. This is not a recommendation to countries other than Israel, because, as a matter of fact, there's another example of small country named Finland. They have a similar setup, except that the chairman is not a professor emeritus, but rather the prime minister, and it's formal. And as you know, Finland is not doing badly either. So, but for Israel, we found out that this setup somehow holds for the last 14 years. But there are dangers, because the very fact that, by the way, it's very important for the form to be formal, not formal, is simply not to compete with the daily business of each agencies. So it is based on the goodwill of the participants to participate. And scarcity of resources helps, although I don't recommend it, of course. But by the same token, the future of this forum also depends on the continuing goodwill and interest of its members, and you can never tell. But so far, as they say, so far, so good. So this is just, in a nutshell, our own experience in that, and I must stress again the fact that the trend now, I mean, we have a very strong R&D industry, which is mainly in CIT. We want to move into science-based industry, and the real key is heavy, very heavy infrastructure, and any idea which will result in supporting it, plus more resources, will help, of course. Thank you.